you. Uh-huh.
Welcome back to another episode of Deal Disruptors. Today we're joined by Shawn, a tech innovator with over a decade of experience within the tech industry with global giants such as Apple and Fossil, and now he's making a disruptive wave with Mozee. How are you, Shawn?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
Good. Happy Friday.
Yes. Happy Friday.
Talk me through how Mozee came about.
Yeah. So it started with my kids, right? So I've got 5 of them. Like for those who who don't know, and I live in kind of a little bit of a golf cart type community in just north of Dallas and Plano. And this idea to shuttle my kids to and from the park using like a golf cart, and over time it was more of how do we make that golf cart like autonomous. And yeah, long story short, like we went from that to building a purpose-built vehicle. So more of like a trolley with no track, right? And so, but it started from my kids.
I love
So
that.
yeah,
And 5 of them. So I understand why you'd want to
yeah.
think about
Oh
logistics.
yeah,
So
yeah,
talk me through how Mozee is going to be used in society.
yeah. So we really kind of our vision is our mission rather is we want to mosey you from point A to point B, right? So like as part of that, like we're founded in and based in Texas, right? So it has a little bit of that southern twang to it, but it's also relevant to what we're doing. And so we really wanted to kind of look at, well, how does transit operate today, right? So most at least American cities are kind of built around 2 things: the American car and mass transit, right? So most countries went rail, and America went highway. So it's like, how do we kind of take that New York City kind of transit model and flavor it, with autonomy? And so, we kind of set on the path to building a mesh network of these kind of 12 passenger vehicles to like mosey you like around your city, or say you're going to like a sporting event, right? You can park further, pay less, or you're being moseyed from building to building on a large college campus or corporate campus. And so yeah, it seems to be the more sensible approach versus what you see in like autonomy today, which is more of, let's take a more conventional car, slap sensors on it, geofence part of a city, and then just let them kind of roam free. And it seems that like society hasn't been very like just very like receptive to that, and it's still a hard problem to solve, and there's a lot of regulatory measures around that. So
And how are you working with different, I guess, government and
yeah,
local? Like, how has that been trying to work with them to roll Mozee out?
yeah. So cities like have been looking for a micro transit system, right? And kind of looking at it, like you saw a lot of investments dumped into kind of those scooters and like bikes back in 2016, 2017, because there was a big problem like in terms of like what they're calling micro, mobility. But the problem with that though is like cities don't really have the necessary infrastructure to have like tons of bike lanes, and so
So
that's only
dangerous.
it's so dangerous, right? And so like that's really only relevant in like the West Coast or maybe even Austin, but again, it's the same narrative for most cities of just not having that infrastructure.
And it's like ends up being drunk kids
Yeah,
getting hit by cars.
yeah, yeah.
And so where is currently your pilots happening?
Yeah, so we've started some kind of like road testing around the Dallas Design District. We're moving to, I think I can say this now, but the city of Arlington, and so we're moving our HQ and manufacturing there, and obviously, like it being the home of like the Dallas Cowboys and the World Series Rangers, and just of course FIFA, is actually going to be there in summer of 2026, and so there's a lot of opportunity there. We've also got some other deployments planned for Potsdam, like New York. It's kind of like north of Buffalo. It's like an hour away from Canada. And so we've got a
Mm.
couple of deployments there.
And so these are driverless, what do you call them?
Right now, like what we're calling them, and it's just the Mozee like prototype vehicle. We don't really have a product name yet, and like we're still kind of like
That'll
going like
come.
back and forth on what to call it. But Mozee seems to be a pretty easy name, and it kind of rolls off the tongue. And
Yeah.
so yeah,
I do love the Mozee about. Like that just
yeah,
makes so much sense to
yeah,
me.
yeah.
And
Mosey along, right? So
yeah, I
yeah.
love it. Um And so are they electric? Like, what is kind of like, how are you manufacturing them? What does that kind of process look like to build
Yeah,
these out?
and so they're fully electric vehicles. The actual chassis of the vehicle is actually 3D printed. And so the entire chassis of the vehicle is actually, yeah, 3D printed. And so we've got a partner, Additive Mobility, that actually owns all the IP to that. And so they're actually helping us manufacture the vehicles. And then Mozee's got our own in-house built like autonomy kit. And so we're basically, taking those vehicles and then slapping our autonomy kit on them. So
That's so interesting.
yeah,
And how did you, like, I know obviously you have an engineering background,
yeah,
but did you have to build a specialized team to kind of support this technology?
yeah. So we've got some world class engineers, spanning from automotive to like what I was doing. Like prior to this, I was working in the Department of Defense, so I worked on unmanned aerial vehicles, and so kind of taking all of our kind of core competencies to build this team has actually been probably one of the most challenging things too. Like actually more difficult than building a self driving vehicle is, you know, building that like cohesive team that's actually gonna execute. Like I always say, the hardest product to build is that is actually the team and not the product itself.
Yeah, that's so true.
Yeah,
And how has that been building that team? Like what is the challenges you guys have faced with different, I don't know, ideas and perspectives?
yeah. Like I think for us, because we're in a really weird spot, right, where we're building these autonomous electric vehicles in the middle of kind of government, at least in the states, kind of pushing, we really need to go towards EV, and like there's a rise of robots, right? So like everything from self-driving to food delivery robots to drones, and so it's a really weird time to be in, on top of all this with AI, ChatGPT and all of this, like generative AI stuff. And so, and on top of that, we're hard tech, right? So there's, of course, there's, SaaS companies, fintech, there's deep tech, and then there's hard tech, right? Which is hardware and software.
Mm.
And so it's, I mean, just with all of that on top of like fundraising, regulatory, so it can be quite the journey, but it can be also, of course, a really big, like rewarding one as well. So,
100%. I was
yeah.
watching the video of how it kind of reads the
Yeah.
spatial
Hmm.
awareness. And so you've taken all of this kind of information from dash cams
Hmm.
and then talk me through like what that process is to then educate this. I'm not good with technology
No, all good.
lingo, but like educate the machine to understand spatial awareness.
Yeah. So most autonomous vehicles, right, use kind of three core sensors, and that's lidar, camera, and radar. We actually don't use any lidar, so we actually lean more towards primarily camera based, with like two additional sensors for like redundancy. But we train our model on just petabytes of dashcam footage of real human driving. Most of the industry is kind of taking like what they've learned from like the DMV handbook, and they kind of hard code like
Mm.
how it sees a vehicle, animal, like people like walking, and that's not human driving, right? Because as humans we text and
So
drive.
true. I just have
Yeah.
some one thing to say on
No.
that.
Yeah.
I actually had to, because I'm Australian, I had to get my license. I had to go and do the test at the
Yeah.
DMV.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, that handbook is so ancient. They have these things still in like the handbook. I'm like, I've never seen anyone do a Blinkridge sign,
Yeah.
but it was funny to actually go through your guys's process to get your license.
Yeah.
Anyone could have a, like, it's actually scary. I think I feel safer with something like Mosey
Yeah.
than the US drivers on the
No,
road.
absolutely. And I always say too, because people are very kind of apprehensive to self-driving vehicles, but if you go back to the 1940s, where elevator used to be operated by man,
Mm.
and it actually took society 50 years to be okay with a self-driving elevator. And so, like, kind of like how now we're stepping into the world of like autonomy. Like, all of our vehicles have like a safety steward, and many people ask, "Well, Sean, if it's autonomous, then why do you have a safety steward there?" And of course, like part of that is like regulatory, but also just passenger comfort, right? I mean, they're not used to that type of technology yet. I mean, at some point you will be. Like if you go back 10 years ago and say, would you stay in a stranger's home? You'd say, no, that's creepy. That'll never work. Well, that's Airbnb. As a kid, you were told not to get in the car with a stranger. Here we are. There's an app to summon a stranger, right? So social norms change. It just takes time and, you know, someone to build something that's sustainable, practical, scalable, all that. So,
I take my hat off to you because you're really disrupting in a way that I think is really exciting for the US in the sense that, I don't really enjoy driving.
Yeah.
Like, to be honest, like I like it when I want to, but sometimes it's like, why can't you be in a nice, comforting, like there's no kind of bougie transport
Yeah.
for people that like transport these days.
Right.
So I think it's really cool what you're doing. And I think you're going to have a lot of challenges, especially with, all of those, as you said, those people that take like a long time to adopt. But what has been the feedback thus far from people that have been enjoying in those areas that you've deployed it?
It's been actually overall kind of surprisingly positive. So one, the vehicle like looks more cute, like it doesn't have like, all of these sensors and just, I mean, so it's a little less intimidating. And also, just like the seating arrangement, right? So it's more of a kind of a horseshoe seating. So, it kind of nourishes, the conversation. It's also spacious. The vehicle is also ADA compliant. So it's a truly all inclusive vehicle. So whether you're able or like disabled, it actually fits everyone. And so we actually had quite a bit of support from the commission, City of Dallas, on like disabilities, and so now they want to use these to like deploy because Dart does have like their like solution, but a lot of people in that, the community like don't want to be like a burden, right? And so they just don't use the service, right?
Mm.
Versus us, like it's already built into the vehicle itself. So it's a truly, you know, um, ADA,
All inclusive.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's all inclusive. So
And I think it's so smart. Like, obviously, I know from compliant reasons you have to have that person there, but
right,
just a funny story. I ordered a Whameo. Well, I accidentally ordered a Whameo
yeah,
through my Uber app, and I
hmm,
excited said, "Do you want to upgrade?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, sure."
yeah,
It was 5 a.m. in the morning. I was going to a yoga class. It was
hmm,
before I had my license in the US.
hmm,
And it goes around this wrong way to
hmm,
my place, and so
hmm,
it's on the other side of the block, and I'm freezing
hmm,
cold,
hmm,
and I try and call Whameo,
yeah, yeah,
and they're like, "There's nothing I can do." Like,
yeah,
the car is just stuck there, and I was pissed. I missed my
yeah.
yoga class, like, there
Oh,
was no one to support as far as a customer service solution. I was like, "I'm never ordering another Whameo again."
yeah,
And so I think if you go onto that transport and maybe there's someone that's rude or being disrespectful and there is no one there to support you, I
yeah.
think the customer service is important to that
Oh
too.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's even, down to how we deploy these vehicles, right? So we only partner with cities and businesses because one, like, that'll help drive adoption too, right? And so while our vehicles could do what, like rideshare with like Cruise and like Waymo and stuff could do, we feel that is again much more sensible to have predefined routes and really start on, kind of what we're calling that first mile, like last mile, like just to get people used to it. And then at some point, as the technology like improves and we get more just overall user adoption, we'll start to roll out more of a robo taxi service. And so that is
Mm.
down our pipeline, but right now we're focused on just getting people used to it.
And what does the pricing model look like?
Yeah, so it really depends on the deployment. So on the city side of things, they will actually subsidize the costs, but you're looking at average $1.32 a mile, depending on where you're at, which is fairly cheap. There's no rating system, there's no tip system, drastically cheaper. So like so for on the city side of things, but then on like the corporate side of things, so like one of our other like alpha customers, JP Morgan, right? So we're just shuttling employees to and from their data center. They're not going to actually, pay for it. But, say we were to roll it out just for like the public, I mean, you're looking at around $1.30 a
Mm.
mile,
Mm.
and over 70% of rideshare is actually only done in 1 to 5 miles. And so people don't really go that far. I mean, it doesn't sound like very far, but 5 miles is actually quite a stretch.
Yeah, that's
So,
interesting.
mhm.
And how has your capital raising part of this venture been?
Yeah, so we just closed our pre-seed round. We're currently
Mm.
raising our seed round, but based on the traction, and we're already post revenue, which is even insane to say for a 2.5-year-old startup. And so we're currently raising our seed round right now. It's going well. We got a really
Mm.
good deal with, of course, the city of Arlington, and so things are looking good. But yeah, we're really a Series A company that's raising a seed. So
Yeah.
that's kind of the best way to think of it. But
That's
Yeah.
incredible though.
So thank
Congratulations.
you.
That's such a huge achievement to be post revenue in
Thank you.
such an early stage. Like you've been around for 2
Yeah.
years.
Crazy. Yeah.
S
Even I can't believe it. So
And what is some of the like just reflecting back on the last few years, if a founder is listening, rolling out your divisions of your team, like what are some lessons you've learned?
it's going to sound really kind of like cliche, but just persistence. I mean, if I even go back just 2 years ago, I knew nothing about transit. I knew nothing about how it worked. I was good at building robots, but I had no idea just the level of, yeah, I mean, we knew nothing about transit. I mean, I didn't personally, right? And so now I know all, just how, like local like transit, like authorities work and like, like how that spans from city to city and just because in the very beginning, we were focused on more of kind of that rideshare model, but then just kind of looking at how transit at least works in the States and how other like countries are doing it, especially at Europe, right? I mean, their transit system is incredible there. And so, just kind of looking at where like people are going and just really how transit works is that was like I was not planning that like whatsoever, but it just kept, yeah, just going through it and just having like persistence and because a lot of a lot of companies fail like of course like money and things like that, but also we had looked at, so there's kind of three core things on what drives a or makes a successful startup, and people usually think money, team, and product, but really the number one thing that I could find as the common denominator was actually timing. So like if you
Mm,
look at a lot of these kind of like unicorns out there, Airbnb launched at a time during recession where like homeowners were actually, like looking to make extra cash, right? I mean, their first year, I believe they had one booking like the entire year. One. Yeah. And so just looking at it, but they launched at a really, like their timing like was like impeccable. And so it really comes down to timing and yeah.
and what do you see, like, let's say a year from now? What do you envision?
Yeah, well, I hope to have, like Mosees across the country, right? And I really do think that we have a really good um, a really good like trajectory like to make that happen because we're just making, I mean, cities left and right are just seeing the vision and they've got the budget for it and they don't want to invest into light rail anymore because you have to kind of build your city around that, right? And if you look at just ridership alone, right? I mean, since 2018, like Gen Z plus, you actually saw a tank in people wanting driver's license because back in my day, like turning 16 like was a big deal because you could take mom or dad's car, like it was freedom. But in a world of Uber and Lyft, you actually saw this kind of downtick in people wanting driver's license. And so, just like the overall like reliance of transit is like becoming a pretty important thing. But on top of that, you are also seeing downshift and people wanting to take buses or like light rail. And so
Mm,
it's like, how do we change that narrative? And it can't be like a bus, it can't be a train. It's got to
mhm,
look a little more swanky, and it's got to be, yeah, like it just has to be an entirely different vehicle. And we're
mhm.
getting, and like that's being pretty well like received like for us. And so, yeah,
That's so cool. Yeah,
yeah,
I'm gonna put some B-roll,
yeah.
for anyone watching, but for anyone who's not watching, can you kind of just describe it out?
Yeah, so it's I mean, I always say that it's like a toaster on wheels. And so
Yeah.
it's like this kind of pod like, structure. It's got like a little sliding door on like, one of the sides. It looks very cute, but yeah, I mean, it's like a toaster on wheels is the best way to probably like describe it. Yeah.
And how do you pay?
Yeah, so we have like a mobile app, right? And so, there's going to be loading and unloading zones, right? So yeah, you would pay and then go to that loading and unloading zone and then just hop on and mosey along, as we say. So,
I love it. And how do you kind of know that it's a pickup? Like, obviously on the app, but is there anything in the ground yet?
yeah, so like nothing on the ground yet. So that's more of a working with like the cities to kind of like define on where those kind of stations are. But a lot of it because we really wanted to be kind of almost like dynamic in a way, right? So like those routes might change based on traffic. So say we have one going in front of the American Airlines Center, right? Like of course during the day that's fine, but maybe during like a Mavs game, like you probably don't want to drive through there. And so like having like a fixed kind of sign or something probably isn't the best way to like execute that.
That's
And so
so
just by
true.
having like the mobile app to know, like where those
That's
areas
genius.
are.
And it's not like you have to tell the
Right.
driver
No, I'm still
to
a driver at all. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
That's so cool. And so, what about international? Have you thought about where you would see your kind of, I know that's obviously a far way off, but like
No.
where would you envision the first, offshore?
No, it's really funny. So we were in Dubai October of last year, and like I mean they love this thing, right? Because they're building a whole city. Yeah,
Were you there for the tech conference?
I was there for GITEX.
Yes, I wanted to go to that this year.
Okay.
How was it?
Well, I didn't go this year, but last year it was insane. I mean, it's like CES like times 100. It's massive, but everything in Dubai is
Because
grand.
that's like a 13-day conference.
Yeah. We were there for 2 weeks.
And you think
Yeah.
it was the best of the best?
It was incredible. It
Oh,
was incredible.
okay,
Yeah.
now
I
you've
didn't get to
made
go this year, but
yeah.
definitely worth the visit. And but yeah, so we talked with them, and they wanted us to stop all operations here in the States and move there and do manufacturing there. And
Of course they
and
did.
I was like, well, let us get, like some like deployments in like the States, and then like we'll talk about it. I know Europe, so like we're now talking with them as well, on potentially like doing something. So it's still
Mm.
early, the conversations, but we're having those conversations sooner, than we, kind of imagined. And so yeah, other countries are watching and listening too. So it's awesome.
That's so exciting. Well, congratulations, Shawn. It's been
Thank you.
so interesting to learn about your journey. I guess last notes from you as far as if you're maybe someone's listening and they have an innovative idea, but fear's holding them back, what would you say to them?
I mean, I'd say, like that's a good thing, right? I mean, I
Mm,
think really like being like an entrepreneur, and I say this all the time, it's like, how do you feel right now? And it really is two feelings and only two feelings. And it's absolute fear and, like euphoria. And it'll change sometimes by the day, sometimes by the hour, right?
yeah.
I mean, we'll have moments where it's just like, this is not going well. And then we get like a call or something of like a new deployment or like a new customer. And so it's like, it's normal to, and I actually say that if you're not worried or concerned or having fear, then you're probably doing something wrong because you want, I like, like that's a good thing,
Yeah.
to, yeah. So,
I agree. I think if you don't have any fear, you've got too big of an ego.
yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
I love it. Well, thank you again.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Uh-huh.